الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. My name is Sophia, I'm your host. The aim of Let the Quran Speak is to help you gain deeper insights into Muslims and Islam, as it is practiced here and in other parts of the world. In this episode, the inner dimensions of fasting. Why would God prescribe the difficult task of fasting for Muslims? What is it intended to do for Muslims? And how can we get the most out of the exercise? Before we explore the inner dimensions of fasting, we want to discuss a street preacher's comments on rape. A Muslim street preacher recently wrote an article in the Toronto Sun offering a prescription to end rape, laws that regulate women's clothing. His writing provoked much criticism among Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Are his ideas about gender in line with Islam? How should Muslims think about rape? And what can we say about his method of preaching? Here to discuss those comments on rape is Brother Shabbir Ali. He's the president of the Islamic Information Center. Brother Shabbir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
Now, what are your thoughts on this individual's comments? He wrote a letter in the Toronto Sun, and it's been the subject of much heated debate since. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, his letter was, it's more a letter than an article, and it was a letter to the
Canadian public.
Yes, more so even to the journalists, to one of the journalists, and it was almost an invitation, not almost, it was an invitation to accept Islam. It was an attempt by this street preacher to show this journalist that Islam is a sensible way of life. It makes sense. It has a solution for one of the problems of the modern world, and therefore you should embrace Islam. And he ended by citing a verse of the Quran. He patterned his letter after by ending with this verse of the Quran. He was mimicking the letter that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, reportedly sent to one of the world leaders at his time. A verse that says, "Come to a word that is common between us and you, that we worship none but God and we do not associate partners with God." So here we have a medley of ideas, the street preacher's attempt to model his letter after that of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but at the same time looking at a contemporary problem and giving his own distorted solution for that contemporary problem.
It's interesting that you say this was an invitation to Islam, because many people reading the letter thought Islam or came away with an impression of Islam that was ridiculous or archaic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, if one is going to give the invitation to Islam in our present time, first of all, one has to avoid such a crude overture about the message in a situation where such an approach itself might be considered to be too brash, inappropriate. One has to sometimes know the situation, not sometimes, but all of the times. We have to know the situations in which we are delivering the message, and the method of delivery has to be appropriate to the circumstance. If two people are sitting together and saying, okay, let's be candid with each other, let's say exactly what's on our minds, but then you say exactly what's on your minds. But if you are in some other situation where people are offering their comments and suggestions in a subtle way, well, then you also have to offer your comments and suggestions in a subtle way. And trying to do it in a more overt manner may seem in that situation to be too rude and definitely inappropriate.
Sometimes Muslims can tend to take the line that Islam is a solution to everything, and they tout that line simplistically. And other people looking at Islam will say, well, you know, life is not that easy. There are a lot more complicated answers to the problems that we face.
Yes, we should say that God has given us a set of instructions, a totality of guidance, which, if followed, will help human beings to achieve a greater degree of happiness in this life and definitely in the life hereafter. But we should not present every prescription of Islam as though this is the right solution for every situation, because some prescriptions in Islam are given for specific situations. In fact, sometimes you also you need to cultivate the circumstance in which the law will apply, and sometimes you have to modify the law to make it appropriate to changing circumstances. So which laws can be modified and which cannot be modified, this requires intense study on the part of Muslim scholarship. But lay persons may just get the impression and present things in a simplistic way that this is Islam, as though it is something fixed and unchangeable, and that this fixed and unchangeable Islam is the solution for every world problem. And if it doesn't seem to be solving the world's problems at the time, it may be because this is how the ordinary preacher or the ordinary Muslim might construe things. It is because something is dreadfully wrong with the world, and the world needs fixing. But often it is the dynamic between the two. In a Muslim society, one would look at the changing needs of the population, and one would look at the law and ask how much of the law is static and how much of it is flexible, and there will be a dynamic interchange between the evolving society and also the evolving law at the same time.
Now, this street preacher seemed to say that it's women's fault that they're being raped, that there's something that they need to change in terms of their clothing. What are your thoughts? What does Islam actually say about that?
Well, to begin with, for the last couple of decades in the modern developed nations, we have come to appreciate that it is not right to blame the victim of any crime. And often women who have been subjected to harassment, molestation, sexual crimes, rape, have been blamed. They get blamed by their relatives, by their friends, by police officers, sometimes even by judges. And this is not fair. A crime is a crime, and a victim is a victim, and the victim should, victims of rape almost always get sympathy, but they also get a certain degree of blame in addition to that, and this is not right. At the same time, if we ask, is there something in the street preacher's comments that in a way can help people to prevent further instances of women being harassed or molested, then in that sense we can appreciate something positive in his message, in that he was just simply asking for women to dress more modestly, with the hope that this might dissuade some people from seeing them as easy targets or as welcoming individuals to sexual advances. Now, this does not mean that a woman who dresses in a provocative manner is welcoming sexual advances, or that she deserves to be raped or harassed. At the same time, a woman who dresses more modestly does give an impression about herself that she's not into that, and she will not welcome any such advances. She is giving a clear message about herself, and that may not necessarily be a true message either. We don't know what's in a person's mind.
But why did the street preacher focus on women, though? Because it's the men who are committing the crime, right? There's also accountability on the part of men. So he doesn't seem to address that at all.
True. His attention is totally distorted. He's looking at the wrong end of the spectrum here. He should look at men and think about what we need to do with men to help them to overcome this problem. Because if men are attacking women, then this is a crime, and men need to be dealt with. Their attitudes towards sex and towards rape have to be changed. If they're thinking that women who dress provocatively are inviting rape, then they have a problem in their own minds. And you asked me, what does Islam say about this? Well, in the Quran, in Surah 33, there is a mention of men in whose hearts there is a disease. So some men do have a sort of disease in their minds. A recent study by Gordon Hall for his PhD dissertation showed that there are 4 types of rapists. And one of the types that he mentioned is the cognitive disorder type. A sort of man who, or anyone for that matter, who would perpetrate such crimes, who interpret situations in ways different from other men. The way that other men would interpret the same situation. So in this category, we have the rapist who actually does think that a woman in provocative clothing is probably inviting rape, or that she might welcome it, or she might enjoy it, or that she's even asking for it, or that she wants it. And so this is a problem in the man's thinking, and that problem has to be eradicated. And to deal with that, we have verses of the Quran. We have the life example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that show that some men need some solutions.
I still would question the provocative clothing line, though, because I think that even Muslim women who are dressed modestly in Muslim countries get raped and sexually abused.
True,
so it's
I
not
agree.
really connected in the way that this street preacher is making it seem.
Yes, I just tried to find one degree of something positive in what the man said, because you know, no person is totally foolish. We have some, you know, in what we say there may be some truth and some falsehood, and one needs to find both. The preacher's comments were taken in the most negative manner possible. The anchor person for the TV station that reported this, you know, referred to his words as fighting words, whereas in fact there were no fighting words. He was just sincerely offering what he thought was his advice to women on how to avoid getting in such situations, how to avoid being victims, if at all that could be avoided, and if there's anything women can do to avoid being victims of rape. This is what his sincere suggestion was. They were not fighting words, but his letter was sensationalized. He was suddenly being graduated from being a street preacher to being a cleric. This is the term that was used to refer to him. And nothing in what he said could be seen in any positive light. But you, at the same time, you are right. He simplistically thought, and as he expressed in this letter, that Muslim women are not being raped because Muslim women dress in a proper way. And the fact is that there are many different types of rapes and rape can occur in many different situations and to almost anyone. Regardless of how they're dressed. And yes, Muslim women dressed in full Muslim women's attire could also be victims and have also been victims and are continually being victims of rape in many parts of the world. And that is not to be denied. So,
and we know that rape mostly takes place, or takes place primarily amongst individuals who know one another. And statistics show that it's more about power than sexual desires. So I would question the individual's arguments a little bit more.
True.
But let's leave it at that for now.
Okay.
So we'll take a break, and when we return, the inner dimensions of fasting.